to Brennocks Reviews, 6th annual Halloween special. This year I will be talking about various things which I'm not going to reveal until the videos go live, basically. So for every night leading up to Halloween from now on, we're going to have some kind of horror-related review, video, retrospective or whatever. Not necessarily with myself, I might have some guests on as well, possibly the core as well at some point. So for this one I'm going to talk about the 2018 film Halloween, which of course is the sequel, the direct sequel to that original film. Now, I know that there were other sequels, and I'm going to get into that as well. So let's just basically talk about that. In fact, let's not review Halloween 2018 here. Let's just talk about the sequels. Maybe tomorrow night we can review Halloween 2018. I think that's probably for the best, to be honest. So this very quick video, I'm just going to talk about the... well, however many there were. It gets confusing really because there were some remakes in there as well. But basically I've got all the films here. In fact, these films were kindly donated on DVD by one of our viewers, Paul Cage, who occasionally gets mentions on this channel. So these are all the films on DVD now. I have got Halloween the original on Blu-ray quite recently. It has also had a 4K re-release, which I haven't picked up. I might do it at some point, but it's not on the top of my priority list, to be honest, because there's quite a lot more 4K films that I think will be presented better. But that's a separate issue anyway. We don't need to go into that. The Halloween movies. Let's just talk about these very briefly, if I can, to explain this, because a lot of people that have seen the Halloween sequel, call it a remake. Maybe a little bit confused going into the film as to exactly where it stands in the scheme of things, because there's a lot of movies here, and do you really need to watch all these in order to understand the new Halloween film? No, you don't. The only one you really need to see, that original film. None of the others, get rid of them. I'm not going to get rid of these because I need to talk about them, but I'm assuming you've seen the original film. I mean, everybody's seen this. Well, not everybody, but people that like horror films, it's usually pretty much the staple in anyone's horror film collection, really, or at least it should be anyway. Maybe that's just me just projecting some ideology there. But this film really has always been iconic as far back as I can remember. I mean, to me, I'm 37 now, so growing up, when I was about 13, that was kind of in the mid-90s, I seem to remember. I specifically remember the summer of 94, my family, my sister and family friends, talking about horror movies and watching horror movies one summer. I seem to remember Stephen King's It was on television that summer, and we all watched that. And we were talking about horror films, a lot of the John Carpenter stuff, because my mother was a fan of John Carpenter, and Halloween came up, and this was really one that we thought was one of the best made horror films. There is, of course, Nightmare on Elm Street, which of course we were big into, and I seem to remember watching quite a few of those that summer as well. And obviously the Friday the 13th movies, but there was something about this film, just the way it was done, it was such a masterpiece. I also remember watching Candyman, the original Candyman, that summer as well. So we really did cram a lot of really good horror films in, but this was the one that stood out as far as I felt. Although I was more of a fan of The Thing, to be honest, but I was more into aliens than I was boogeymen kind of thing. But separate argument. So with this movie anyway, it's one that started it all. Very simple premise. Evil boogeyman seems to be immortal. But if you shoot him, he just gets back up again. No explanation as to why. There never was really much of an explanation. Not a satisfactory one anyway in any of the other films. And he just kills because he just does. And that was in this film. And in this one he particularly stalks babysitters as well. So this film came out as a very low budget film, and it made a hell of a lot of money. So that spawned a lot of sequels. So that was that one, very straightforward premise. But they had to mess it up, didn't they, with the sequels? And let's just very quickly talk about how these are laid out, because it does get a little bit confusing. A lot of people remember bits here and there, but nobody that I know anyway has really kind of put the knowledge together. When I've been talking to people about this, there's not that many people that understand like which films kind of stood where and so on and so forth in the mythology. And again, this doesn't matter. You don't need to know this watching the new film. So after that first film, there was Halloween 2. Now, this one to me was really the only satisfying sequel to that original film. It wasn't John Carpenter's film in that, well, he didn't direct it. I think he wrote it because he was kind of forced to, from what I understand. It's not a terrible film. It's got its moments, to be honest. But in this one, they reveal that the Jamie Lee Curtis character, Laurie Strode, is actually the sister of the Shape, Michael Myers. That's the villain, obviously. And she didn't know this going into this. Obviously, there's a bit more to it than that, but effectively she's the sister of the bad guy. It kind of explains why he was maybe going after her specifically and trying to kill her in that first film. So it kind of adds a new context. So when you go back and watch the original film, the way you see it is very differently to what you would have done if it was just that first film on its own. This one establishes she is his sister, and the mythology throughout the sequels goes from there. So not a bad film. At the end of the film, he kind of blows up, in a massive fireball. He's left burning on the ground. He's pretty much dead as Michael Myers has ever been. At the end of this film, he was definitively dead, but he came back. But he didn't come back in number 3. Number 3 was an attempt at something different. It was, I won't go into the specifics of it, but it was basically nothing to do with Michael Myers. It was a kind of generic horror film. It's got a bit of a cult following as this one. I wasn't really wowed by it, to be honest. Halloween 3 Season of the Witch.
Halloween. The world's going to change tonight, Doctor. Happy Halloween. Stop it!
Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, the night no one comes home.
It's very, very difficult to explain, but it's to do with these Halloween costumes that kind of kill kids. It's pretty nasty in some parts, to be honest. But this was an attempt to turn the Halloween franchise into kind of an anthology thing, so that each movie is its own thing and has its own backstory and has no connectivity as such to any of the other films that they would have gone on to do. But it wasn't very successful, and a lot of the fan base was screaming out for the return of Michael Myers. So that led to Halloween 4, the return of Michael Myers. And in this one, this was the beginning of a new trilogy, effectively. So this was number 4. So throughout number 4, 5, which was The Revenge of Michael Myers, and 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. So 4, 5 and 6 are kind of their own trilogy of movies, kind of go off into their own little story. I think it was number 4 pretty much establishes that Jamie Lee Curtis's character Laurie Strode is dead. She died off screen. They killed her off screen, effectively, so she's out of it. Now, throughout all these films, Donald Pleasance is in the films, and he gives as good as a performance as he could, but it's nice to see him back. So these films aren't terrible. I'd say give them a watch. They aren't brilliant, though. They're very... But, you know, they've got their fan base, and if you haven't watched them, give them a chance, because I only just saw these for the first time in the last... was about 2 years ago, thanks to Paul Cage giving me these films. I'd never seen them, was never interested in seeing them, but giving them a chance to watch them, I kind of enjoyed them to a degree, going in with very, very low expectations. So, like I say, 4, 5 and 6, their own trilogy, and established that the Laurie Strode character is dead. They killed her off screen. So these came out through the 80s and into the 90s. I think even Paul Rudd was in the last of these films. So that's Halloween 6, effectively. And that's basically that trilogy. So they didn't do very well, but then an attempt was made to do a proper film, because at this point, in the mid-90s, the Scream movies had come out, especially number 1 and 2, and the first film in particular paid rather prominent homage to the first Halloween film, so there was a lot more interest about 20 years after the original Halloween movie had come out in that franchise again. But at this point, the movies that they've been releasing in the last few years up till that point weren't very good. So given the sort of teen slasher horror movie genre was really kind of coming back into something that could make box office money, like I say, with Scream films and I Know What You Did Last Summer and all these other films as well that tried to kind of cash in on it, a lot of people, I guess, thought, let's bring Halloween back, but let's do it right, because the last few films haven't been great. So they thought, how can we do that? What can we really do to give this a legitimacy that's been lacking in these movies in the last few sequels? They brought Jamie Lee Curtis back, Halloween H2O. She's alive again. No explanation as to why. Effectively, they retconned all of the movies from number 3 onwards. It wasn't a specific retcon, I don't think. I mean, I guess it was because Laurie Strode's still alive. They don't go as far as to say that those films don't count. This is just basically the follow-up to Halloween 2. So number 2 still counts because in this one it's... I think it might be referenced. At the very least, it's not ignored that Jamie Lee Curtis's character is the sister of Michael Myers. And like I said, this came out on the 20th anniversary, 1998. It tries to be the first Halloween film again in a lot of ways. It's not very good, but it's not bad. It's very meh, but it's a little bit of an improvement on the last few films, to be honest. And what I did like about this film is the fact that at one point somebody's watching Scream 2 on TV. And I found that really funny because in Scream 1, they're watching the original Halloween on TV. So this was kind of a bit of a nod to those films. So Jamie Lee Curtis is very good in this as well. I think the only film that she wasn't very good in was the film that came after this, Halloween Resurrection. One of the worst films I have ever seen. Not just the worst film in the franchise, one of the worst films I have ever seen. It is terrible. I've spoken about this in a previous video as well. Busta Rhymes is in this. I don't hate Busta Rhymes, to be honest, but he didn't belong in a Halloween movie, I'm sorry. This came out, was it 2000? I think this came out. Not a great year for... well, not a great era for films, to be honest. The early 2000s, to me, was a really depressing time to be a fan of good movies because there weren't that many coming out. And they were all copying off things that had been done before. This was trying to cash in on the Blair Witch Project. There are certain bits in this where you see things through the eyes of a camera that somebody's in a house filming and being stalked by Michael Myers. Doesn't work at all. This is awful. And it killed the franchise effectively until they kind of rebooted it, I guess, with remakes, which I haven't actually watched these yet. Rob Zombie remakes. From what I understand, again, like Halloween 3, got a bit of a cult following. But from what I've seen of them, they're not really for me. From what I understand, they're very mean-spirited as well in comparison to the other films. So I might watch them at some point, but it's, like I said, not on the top of my priority list. But, so are you confused? Because basically... going back to Halloween Resurrection, which is the last film that they did before the remakes, this is the one with Busta Rhymes, they again kill Jamie Lee Curtis's character off, but they actually kill her off on screen this time. She falls from a ledge into a load of trees or something after having a bit of a fight with Michael Myers. From what I understand, Jamie Lee Curtis didn't want to do this and kind of insisted that her character be killed off. That's what I heard. I don't know how true that is, but it would make sense. She's kind of phoning it in, and the way that they handled the continuity between Halloween H2O and this one was very disrespectful because they basically change the backstory, the ending of Halloween H2O, which wasn't a terrible ending, to be honest. It was one of the few kind of highlights of the film, the way that it ends. They kind of changed the story in this one. I'm not going to explain it, but if you watch it, you'll see what I mean. So basically, when you go back to watching Halloween H2O, the ending of that film, you're not going to see it in the same way once you see this. Basically, she chops Michael Myers' head off right at the end of the film, and it turns out in the next one, that wasn't actually Michael Myers, that was a paramedic who'd been kind of gagged or something, and he couldn't talk, and he was just basically scuffling, and she thought it was Michael Myers and chopped his head off. So that's like, what the hell? You watch that film, it's Michael Myers' head she chops off. Good ending. Terrible. Sorry, I'm getting fired up here because that really pissed me off that they did that. So that was the franchise after that, which then leads us to where we are today. Halloween, as it's just called, 2018. That's not the name of the film, it's just Halloween, released in 2018. And Jamie Lee Curtis is back for a third time. She's been killed more times than Michael Myers, practically, at this point. But the Halloween sequel as it is that's come out this year. I'm going to do review in the next video, but it is effectively a rehash at doing Halloween 2. It ignores all of the films from the second one, including the second one, onwards. I'm going to explain that. I'm going to talk about the film in the next video. So for now, I'm going to leave it there and say thank you very much for watching, and don't have nightmares.